With less than 12 months until the UK officially leaves, some of the biggest questions about what will happen to the Irish border and the issue of customs seem largely unanswered. Well, Brexit campaigner Patrick Minford holds the chair of Applied Economics at Cardiff University as chair of Economists for Free Trade. Morning, Patrick.
Good morning, Vaughan.
I suspect you're not a fan of either of these two options that are being talked about. Are you this MaxFac or customs partnership?
Well, the customs partnership is really the customs union by another name, and will be very damaging to the UK because it would stop us making these free trade agreements around the world. So it'd stop free trade, which is obviously bad for the UK. And the MaxFac is simply the seamless application of customs procedures, which is mandated by the WTO today. I mean, for some reason, it's John Thompson from the HMRC Permanent Secretary said it would cost 20 billion, which is absolute nonsense because it's all computerized, and that would be completely illegal that it's all done by paper. So actually it's virtually costless. So there's lots of disinformation about this. Customs union is bad, not good. Customs partnership is bad, not good. And MaxFac is simply the way of the future for running customs.
So you're saying actually MaxFac is just a way of dressing up WTO rules?
Yeah, it's just a way of doing customs the modern way. Yes, it's just doing customs the modern way, which is seamless. I mean, they cost nothing. The Swiss have explained that the Swiss-EU border is costless. Most borders are nowadays between developed countries are costless. 98% of traffic on average goes through without being checked. And the 2% takes a day maximum. So that's modern customs, which are mandated by the WTO. A lot of people haven't caught up with what the WTO has actually done in the last decade.
Well, as I understood John Thompson, the HMRC head's argument for that 20 billion figure, he said it was because you need customs declarations, and customs declarations, I can't remember how many pounds they cost a time, times the number of things crossing the border, and that gives you 20 billion.
Exactly, but the problem about what he said is it's perfectly. I mean, he was in a tight corner because the whole civil service is against Brexit, and he was perceived as being, on the side of Brexit, saying it wouldn't cost much. So he came up with this 20 billion, which, as you rightly explained. But the problem about it, which he knows very well, is that there's no paperwork anymore at customs. It's all done computerized pre-arrival clearing. And that's, of course, costless. I mean, the setup costs, you need a piece of paper, you need a template.
Well, the cost is there because the government chooses to charge the cost, presumably. Isn't it, that this is what we choose to charge at the moment for stuff coming from outside the EU, and he's just presuming that that's what we would charge for stuff that was coming from the EU once we were outside it?
Well, he's saying there's paperwork, you see. That's the key point. And he says it costs £20 to produce a piece of paper to customs. But modern customs don't use paperwork. It's all gone out with the ark. And none of us use paperwork anymore. We all use computers. So this is all nonsense. Once the first time it goes through, you probably need a piece of paper. From then on, it's just a routine transaction on a computer. And that's why modern customs are seamless, and why the WTO has said they've got to be seamless, because modern logistics, just in time, require customs to get out of the way. And that's why it's seamless all over the world, which is why MaxFac is simply common sense. Maximum facilitation is simply the modern way to do it.
Yeah, you say it should be seamless, but if we look at the Turkey-EU border, for instance, and Turkey is in the customs union, there are still complaints from people driving trucks that they're queuing up at the border.
Yes, but Turkey is a very special case. It's the only country, by the way, that has a customs union with the EU. And nobody else, nobody like Switzerland, they don't have a customs union with the EU. Nobody has a customs union with the EU. The Turkey border is very special because, of course, it's the basic border with the developing world. So everybody's trying to smuggle on that border. It's a completely different thing from the borders we face with the EU as a developed country. That's the reason Turkey's so different.
So you're confident that... there was talk this week. Barnier was saying that the cliff is there. We could fall off. You're saying there is no cliff. That trade would flow anyway.
There's a cliff for Mr. Barnier. If Mr. Barnier doesn't get a trade deal, the EU is in deep trouble. It'll face tariffs from the UK. It may not get its money. Brexit will come 2 years earlier. There may not be a transition. That is really bad for the EU. And Mr. Barnier knows that very well. So I think he wants a deal. He would obviously like us not to leave at all. There's a bunch of people who would like to reverse the referendum, but that's not going to happen, obviously, because the referendum has happened, and the economics of leaving, because of free trade, trump the idea of staying with a failing EU, frankly. So Mr. Barnier needs a deal, because the alternative for him is terrible. Of course, Mrs. May would be best off with no deal, but the parliamentary arithmetic makes that very difficult for her.
If we look at sort of big, hefty key employers in Wales, let's say the big four, let's call them Airbus, Ford, Tata and General Electric. Now, GE would probably be fine, whatever happens, because they're in the world market. They're servicing aero engines that come in from all over the world. But the other three need some sort of arrangement, don't they?
Well, they'll all have arrangements. I mean, most of these companies will voluntarily adhere, of course, out of their own self-interest, to the export standards of the EU. And they will do whatever the EU wants because they're totally integrated in the EU. They're what Mrs. May calls her first basket. But the interesting thing about this first basket is they'll all have standard conformity with the EU out of pure commercial interests. And so will any company that exports heavily to the EU. On their exports, they will be completely conformable, of course, and they will continue to be conformable. But the issue about the single market is whether everybody else has got to be conformable, or whether even they have got to be conformable on the stuff they don't sell to the EU. And some countries some companies like Jaguar Land Rover sell a lot of their output around the world on which they have to be compatible with other people's standards. So it's all commercial interests. There's a lot of nonsense and disinformation about this.
Patrick, always a joy to speak to you. Putting the cat amongst the pigeons, as always. Thank you very much.